Well, well, it's October, and it's creepy story time on the Green Guard Guy channel. By request again, whatever. Folks want the stuff, some of you do, so I'm going to keep it up. Now, the story today is about an abandoned cemetery. Now, there's no paranormal, no aliens, just an abandoned cemetery. Any of you folks out there who remember back to being a child, do you recall that children often had secret knowledge that adults did not have about places and things, and maybe people, and stuff like that? This happens because the children will hang around, like in the weeds at a vacant lot, or they'll find an abandoned building, or, something like on that order. Do anybody remember that? We had like a wild man in the alleys in Chicago that, my folks didn't know anything about the wild men that lived in the neighborhood, but us kids knew all about it, Yeah, why? Because we traveled the alleys, see, and so did he. That kind of stuff. Well, I don't know how information like that passes, through the kids' community, but it seems somehow when we get to be adults, either it's not important anymore, or we just forget about it or something, and so it seems to only travel below a certain age group. The abandoned cemetery was one of those things. The adults in the area, maybe a few historians or something, probably knew something about the place. There were probably a few adults. But in general, that was kids' business. We knew all about the abandoned cemetery. And initially, I think our trips in there were pretty much entirely male boys, good creepy places, man, I'm telling you. And we did have a habit of visiting cemeteries at night. We really preferred the ones that dated way back, and even if the abandoned ones were absolutely the finest, but there were some that were still maintained yet, even though they were completely planted out. They had no more room for any more graves, smallish local cemeteries that would have tombstones, dating back well into the 19th century most of the time, But the abandoned cemetery was absolutely the finest. It was top, okay. And I guess after us boys kind of, got used to the idea that we probably weren't going to die when we went in there, Dracula did not rise up from behind the tombstones to suck our blood. We got brave enough that then I guess we wanted to kind of show off to the girls, and I guess it's fun to make the girls scream, right? And I'm sure you guys know all about that stuff. You put a frog in her lunchbox, eh? Well, yeah, that's a lot of the guys that I did hang out with, say in my early high school years, for instance, a lot of them were associated with school sporting events. They were gymnasts or things like this. Well, so they had good connections with the cheerleaders, and so when we went on one of these expeditions into cemeteries on a full moon night, we would often be sure to pack a good quantity of cheerleaders. Terry, he had his driver's license just a little ahead of the rest of us, and so whereas I was not legal to pilot a car, I don't think at this time, Terry was, and his dad had been very generous and had given him I think it was a 61 Rambler station wagon, fire engine red and white. Ugly old thing, it was like what we used to say about Studebakers. They called them steady breakers, because if you showed up to pick up your date in a Studebaker, that was the end of the business. She'd go out with a guy in the Chevy. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of like that with Ramblers too. This car was not cool, and Terry knew it, but he had a good sense of humor. We all did about it. We loved that thing because we get a lot of people in a '61 Rambler station wagon, and so we'd pack guys in there. We'd pack the girls in there, we'd take off, heading out of town looking for the place. Well, the abandoned cemetery, it was so perfect that my memories of it, it's like, they're actually kind of almost hard for me to believe that this place existed, because it would have been the absolute perfect set for Hollywood horror. They wouldn't have had to do anything to the place. Nothing. Okay? So to describe what I'm talking about here is first you're way out there. You're way out somewhere out of town. It's just this cornfields and cow pastures, woodlots, where this place was located. And my recollection is that there was like a pasture, a cornfield, and then this large woodlot of old trees, and then another pasture somewhere out there, open areas. And so to get into the abandoned cemetery, we'd park the car along the road by the cornfield, and there'd be this little draw that went down through the woods. And so somebody was going in and out of there. It wasn't just a deer trail, I don't think. Someone else knew it was there, because the grass was sometimes pounded down a bit from foot. Anyway, to get in there, at large overhanging oak trees, rather dark, this tunnel through the trees, and so we go down this dark tunnel, and you get to the end of it where it opens up on the cemetery. Well, there were two big pillars either side of the gates. One of the gates was knocked off and laying down to the ground. The other one was only on one hinge, cockeyed. The pillars were 15 degrees off vertical and so on, decrepit. And it was wrought iron gates, with spikes on top and stuff. Old time iron work at the gate of this place. Well, we'd step through and get inside of the place, and it'd be tombstones still visible, sticking up out of the weeds and the grass. There would be trees of significant age. I don't know, 75, maybe 100 years, I don't know. But large, old oaks, big trees, growing right out of the middle of graves, pushing the gravestones over, creepy. Everything was, kind of a little bit cockeyed. Nothing was straight in the place. The tree roots had heaved almost everything that was there, but nobody had ever desecrated the site. There was no, knocking over of tombstones or anything. Everything was intact. There's only natural damage in there. And, the most remarkable part of it is that some of the grave markers had dates that went back to, times like, I believe, 1784. Definitely, I recall 1790 dates on these tombstones. I did not think there really was anybody in that area at that time. It's surprised the heck out of me. That's all I can say, because most people were out on the East Coast, and to have made it that far west into northern Illinois. I mean, the French had been there ahead of time, Champlain and that and Dubuque, and they had done fur trading and such, and there were trappers, who'd been in the regions, but, these were pretty much looked like American settlers from the names on the graves. A lot of the names were sort of English, Well, just the date, the age, was enough to, really put a shiver up your spine. But right in the middle of that place, there was this one very large monument. Somebody buried there. It had pretty good money, I guess, to invest in a marker. And, there was a little wrought iron metal fence around this particular monument. The monument itself was fairly tall. I believe it almost sat 8 feet up in the air or so over our heads. It was a rectangular sort of a column with a bigger rectangle on the bottom. Then the column goes up, and like a table on the top that had a bronze spread eagle on a ball on top of this thing, and it was tipped about like so, cockeyed. If you got in there on a night when the moon was full, but there was tule fog or mist forming, going through the trees, it was absolutely frightening. Okay, just looking at it was enough to send a shiver up your spine, especially if you were like 16 years old, like most of us. Yeah, so we go in there, and we bring the ladies, bring the girls with, and we wander around and, read the gravestones and look at the amazing trees growing out of the graves and all this, and get ourselves a little terrified, I suppose, being out there at night. And, well, one time, I kind of ducked behind a tree in the place. Everybody else sort of moved off away as they were looking at stuff. And I'm back there, and I get this wild idea. I'm going to scare them. Yeah, I was scare them people. And so when they were heading this way, I came running out from behind that tree, waving my arms and screaming bloody murder, Oh! Well, no ifs, ands, buts, maybes, wham, everybody was on the trail, dust beaten, they were out of there, okay, and I'm laughing, oh, this is so much fun, all of a sudden I realize I hear the car doors, and next thing the car disappears down the road. Didn't take me long to figure out. I just outwitted myself. Yeah, I was always pulling something. I used to get in trouble and a lot because I had a crazy ass sense of humor. I just did. I loved pranks when I was younger. So there I was, alone in the abandoned cemetery under the moon at night. All my friends were gone, and they were terrified, so they just kept going. Also miles from my home. Long walk. Oh boy. So I'm sitting there feeling, boy, you a dumb sucker. And I go walking down the trail, and I get out to the road, and looking around, and all of a sudden see headlights coming. Well, I guess they got about a mile down the road or so when suddenly they realized Bill's not in the car. So they quick turned around. Terry says, God, we got to get Bill. Start going back, and all of a sudden they're going, you know what? You think that was Bill come out from behind that tree? Yeah, they figured it out. And so the Rambler comes by at like 1 mile an hour, and I'm reaching for the door handle, and they're pushing the lock down, and taking off. And they messed with me for some time before they finally broke down and let me back in that car. Yeah, I thought I was pretty clever, Well, anyway, folks, there's the abandoned cemetery, and I guess it's appropriate for Halloween. Aloha. Enjoy the holiday. Hang loose.